Welcome to Swisspreneur, a podcast about startup stories and hands-on learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. My name is Sylvan and I will be your host. Today we're in the heart of Zurich and are meeting with Michael Born, the CEO and co-founder of PXL Vision, for our next Q&A session. As soon as we entered the PXL Vision office, the startup spirit jumped right in our faces. We saw laptops on cardboard boxes, sketches on whiteboards, and eager-looking employees from all over the world hovering over them. Michael is a successful serial entrepreneur. He co-founded Dacuda a couple of years ago and then sold it to Magic Leap in 2017. Michael is also a very down-to-earth founder and CEO and greeted us with a welcoming smile. After stocking up on some water and coffee, we headed over to the meeting room. And now, off we go with the first question on how to find the right co-founders. Before we get started with the episode, I would like to introduce you to SBB Startup. If you think that your company is a good fit for the Swiss Railways, get in touch with them or learn more about their startup programs at sbbstartup.com. Michael, a very warm welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about finding the right co-founders in today's Q&A session. And we start with the first question right away, coming from Björn F. He asks, do I need a co-founder at all? What is your take on this?
Well, I think you should, in any case, have a co-founder. Usually a team is just much better. Of course, it might work if you're alone. Why not? I wouldn't exclude this, but usually your chances to succeed are just much better in a team.
And why is that the case? Because you can split the workload on several shoulders, or why does that actually make a lot of sense?
Yeah, I mean, usually in a team you would have different capabilities, different backgrounds, different personalities. And usually also, I mean, even if you talk to someone, you usually have other ideas, or if you just talk to yourself, basically.
Right.
And also a startup is actually quite rough at times. So you really need, people who are very tight and very committed. And usually this would be founders. Like, it's very rare to find people that you can just recruit and that you can fully rely on the same way as you could rely on a founder.
Right, makes sense. And at what stage of the company should you look for co-founders is a question from Eingefleischt.
So I think the earlier the better. Why? I think when you actually define the whole journey, the whole vision, everything together, then it's much more aligned. Of course, you could, start yourself and then build a team around you. So this may work, but still it's really important to have a joint vision and the same ideas. And co-founders should consider this as their own baby, just as much as you do. And this might be more difficult if you do this later.
So now we know why it's important that you look for co-founders and also do that as early as possible. But Cedric Waldburger asked, how many co-founders should you actually look for, and actually can you also look for? So is there an ideal number and the maximum number of ideal co-founders?
Yeah, so I mean, my experience may be somewhat limited. I've done just a couple of startups so far. I believe that just one co-founder might work, but probably it's better to have more than one co-founder. I would say probably more than a bigger team than 5 co-founders might get a bit difficult to handle. Also, maybe a bit difficult from a buy-in perspective. So I would assume the ideal number is really between 3 and 5.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
Usually, in our teams were usually 4.
Okay,
this has worked quite.
The golden middle.
Yeah.
Then Luca Schuler asked, is a co-founder necessarily a person, or can it also be a company? For example, maybe a branding or communication agency that becomes sort of your co-founder.
Yeah, well, I believe in people. So it really depends, what person would be behind and would would this person suddenly be exchanged? So if it's an agency, you never quite know what happens with the company.
Right.
So yeah, if it's a sole company and this is just the sole owner is the person you really want, why not? But ultimately, you invest or you build on people and their capabilities. So the very usual thing is actually to have a private individual as co-founder.
And I guess the $1 million question in that regard, also coming from Eingefleischt, where do I find my co-founders?
Yeah, so it depends what co-founder you're looking for. Is it a sales oriented co-founder? Is it a tech geek, or this might define a bit where you look for. I think there's many very good initiatives in Switzerland, such as Venture Challenge, for example, from the EFJ. There's probably platforms such as, I believe, CoFoundMe. There's initiatives like maybe Meetup or some other actually startup events. There's the startup camps, where you spend a couple of days just with other potential co-founders developing a business idea. Right. So I think there's many initiatives, and if you just look for a co-founder, a startup, you'll find many different initiatives. For me, I had a business background, so I actually looked for technical people because I wanted to do a technical startup. And I deliberately went to ETH, but this was a venture challenge by EFJ. Okay. So basically there I met very good people with technical ideas, and this has worked very well.
Cool. The next question comes from Helena, and she asks, friends or also family as co-founders, yay or nay?
I think it's clear yay. No, yes, I would say. Of course, it's always a bit of a risk if if you start up something really with a close friend, because it's going to be a journey, and it's going to change the friendship in one way or the other. Right. But change is not necessarily bad. It can also strengthen the friendship. So personally, I have done very good experiences with working actually with close friends, because you also know exactly what you can expect. Right. You can also trust 100%. And I spent much more time with these people than compared to if we would not have done something together. Right. So I think it's a very good thing to do. In the same time, of course, you could potentially lose a very close friend. So it is a bit of a risk, but probably worth taking if it feels right to you. Right.
The next question comes from Larson, and he asked, for how long should I already know my co-founder before actually starting the company together?
I think it's an advantage if you know him for at least some time, and if you have worked or done a joint project, or maybe if you have done a thesis together or just done something together, so at least how serious is he, or she. At the end of the day, how committed also, how, does it work together from a personal perspective? I think these are things which you probably find out pretty fast. So also in this respect, maybe a startup camp is actually a good thing, because you would then spend maybe 24, 48 or whatever hours which may be very intense. And if this works out, usually I think would be good enough. I don't need to know someone for 2 years to
Sure. Can you tell us how you did that with the Venture Challenge? How did that develop after you participated there? What were the next steps that you took?
Yeah, so Venture Challenge, first of all, we had 3 months. So each week one lesson over 3 months. So you had time to get to use the people, which is very good. After this, we still had about 1 year where this was kind of, we did some initiatives like Venture Kick, for example, or I think some other startup competitions. And so we did some work, but it was not super close. But still, we thought about the idea. You knew what the others would do, how they would behave. And so this is a very ideal setup. So we knew each other quite well already when we actually set up the company then.
Okay. But not before the venture challenge. That was the first time where you actually met in person.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was complete coincidence, like who like the group was a complete coincidence, like how we came together.
Okay. Did you have any specific criteria that you were looking for? I mean, you said you were looking for technical knowledge.
I looked for the product, I think, and at the end of the day it was a coincidence because I missed the first session.
Okay.
So I was actually allocated to one group. So actually it was a complete coincidence.
The nice coincidences that life plays.
Yeah.
The next question comes also from Lukas Schuler, and he asks, does my co-founder need to be geographically close? You are all based in Zurich or around Zurich?
I think it's a tougher one, and probably depends a bit on the business model also and on the industry you're in and so on. Usually I think it definitely helps because especially in the beginning, it's such an intensive phase, and also you need to, discuss a lot of things. So usually I think it does help a lot. On the other hand, if one guy sits in Silicon Valley and you sit here, for example, this may also be quite interesting from a setup perspective. But then you should probably know your person already quite well because, at least, it's different time zones and so on which brings its own challenges.
So remote can work, but probably only with a long history that you already know each other for quite a long time.
Yeah, or just someone you really interact with very well.
Cedric asked, what is a good test to figure out if we're a good team? Maybe you can also tell from your personal experience how you then did that when you entered that group.
I think I partly answered already. When you do something, you have a joint goal for a certain period and you try to pursue it. So that's probably the best, whether it's just one weekend or one competition or something challenging, which you need to achieve in a group. I could also think this could also be something non-business related, just go a weekend somewhere and see.
Right.
But I mean, if you have a joint goal for maybe 2 days and you achieve it as a group, then I think this is then you know how people behave.
Okay, that's a good sign then. Is this very much driven by your gut feeling or just your general feeling for the people? Or do you also have very raw criteria that you apply and say, hey, this is actually a good team because of this, this, and this? Or is this really summarized in sort of a gut feeling?
Yeah, it's both. I mean, gut feeling is super important. You work with this person's extremely close day and night. You probably spend more time with your co-founders than with your family and close friends. So gut feeling and just feeling comfortable working with them is really, really important. Also trusting each other and so on. You need to be able to fully rely on. In the same time, of course, you should only work with people who really can contribute something. So this is, I really believe a lot in interdisciplinary teams. With Dacuda, for example, we had, and also with PXL Vision now, we have a very balanced background from technical and business expertise, for example. I believe in different characters. In the sense that you might have the very visionary guy or the very sales-oriented guy who's very, very important in every startup, but just as important you might have the very thorough guy just cleaning up a little bit behind the first one. To have sound technical expertise, of course, in a tech startup, absolutely mandatory. So I believe in a combination of skills, competence, personality. And gut feeling.
This is also closely linked to Cedric's next question. Should my co-founder be similar or totally opposite to me? And here you sort of say, to a certain degree, you need to have both aspects, right? If I understood you correctly.
Yeah, in any case, there should be different competencies. There should be different characters in any case, yes. But I think the value set, or the core values that should still be pretty coherent, and I mean also the vision, the goal that you pursue really need to be aligned on this, because if this is not, one guy just wants to have a small company growing steadily, but and the other one wants to build the next Facebook, it's probably not going to work, because either one guy just does the whole job or loses the other one, or so having the same objective, vision, but also value set, I think this is key. But apart from that, you should really be as varied as possible as a team. So we did, for example, these color schemes, like there's red people, yellow people, and blue. So it's good if this is very balanced, because it means like you can cope with more situations.
Yeah. There's a beautiful quote, I think, that applies perfectly to what you just described. A good team is shared values but complementary skill sets. And I think this is the perfect description for what you just said. Yeah. How do you actually make sure that your values are aligned? Do you talk about them? Do you come in them like from a personal perspective and then see how they sort of add to the other people's value? How do you make sure that you're aligned in terms of values?
With PXL Vision, I think we were already like aligned a lot, because we've been working together for a couple of years, like since 2010, 11, and 12, depending on the co-founder. I believe like probably 80-90% of the values are probably already there, and if this does not match, I think you can talk and discuss for a long time, and probably also waste a lot of energies. So that's why I think it should just fit together from a start. Then, of course, a whole different question is how do you create a culture, and how do you, create these values, or maybe I would more say make these values visible in a company. So there's a whole different discussion. I believe it usually helps that you also listen to the organization, what values are already there, and then try to build on it, rather than just proclaiming, or just saying, okay, these are the values. Now live after them, and let's discuss until you agree. Like this would usually not work.
So does that also mean that when you actually choose your co-founders, that you check for values there and choose them to fit your personal values, for example, the values that you want to have for your company, and not try to change them later on along the process?
I would say so. And I mean, I don't have a checklist and go through this, but this is probably what I mean with gut feeling, like a lot, which is, you talk with them, would you want to have a beer together? Maybe you discuss about some things which matter to you, and you see if this matches.
We take a short break to introduce you to the startup of the week, Yamo. Yamo is a direct-to-consumer baby and children food company. They are active in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, and are among Switzerland's top 100 startups. They also count renowned angels and VCs as their backers. Yamo is growing its team at a fast pace and has open positions in operations, marketing, and software development. If you want to join one of Switzerland's premier startups and actually make a difference in people's lives, then head on over to their job section at www.yamo.bio.
Now let's also talk about the investment side of co-founders. Lucas Schuler asked, how much time does my co-founder need to be willing to invest? And is it possible that they also have a role on the side and work for something else as co-founders for your company?
So from a commitment level, I think 100%. And everything else is just not enough. Of course, you could do here and there some other activities if this is, if this helps the company, if this helps to create a network, which if this matters to you personally because you can get energy out of it. So to a certain extent, I would actually think it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, at the end of the day, you have 24 hours, and I would like to see my co-founders to be fully committed, for the same startups as I'm working for.
That makes sense. And should they also invest into the company financially, the co-founders?
I think a co-founder or any founder invests a lot, usually not really financially as such, but with his lifetime and with his full energy, and at the end of the day also opportunity cost. Could do something else. I don't really believe that you need to invest a lot of money. You have enough stake in it anyway. Yeah, and quite often I want a co-founder because of his skills, because of his value he brings to the company, not because of his money, because that's the investor's role.
Exactly. Just in case that there's one co-founder who's investing money into the company, then a new co-founder joins. Should that co-founder invest the same amount of money just to have the balance right, or doesn't that matter too much either?
I think it depends very much on the situation. Maybe the first co-founder is super rich and has brought money and has brought the company to a certain level. If the other guy joins later, they'll need to find some kind of agreement. But I think this has to be looked at in every specific situation. It would not be very, very professional to give any broad advice without knowing the details.
Yeah. Another very important topic is your equity. You have shares of the company usually. How do you split that amongst co-founders? Just equally, or what is your best practice there?
So if you start together and everyone is just equally engaged, you don't have a long prehistory, or you just start from zero. Right. I think it's probably not much reason why there should be large differences, any differences, or at least not large differences between the founders. Having said this, of course, maybe one founder has very critical skills or gives up sacrifices much more than another guy. Maybe has much more experience, and the other guy is straight from university. Mm-hmm. So there may be variations. I wouldn't exclude this, but as a general rule of thumb, I think in the management team, it's good if it's fairly equal, or at least that anybody has a major stake in it. Right. A major stake in it, and the stake should be big enough that it really is worth going any extra mile which is required.
Closely linked to that is also the salary of a co-founder. Should co-founders get the same salaries, or do you make any differences there?
So the same applies. I think it's fair if one guy has 20 years of experience, the other guy has none, and then obviously probably they wouldn't have the same salary. Right. If one guy has 4 kids to feed and one guy is straight from university, maybe also not. But again, also here I would really have discussed this in a very specific case. I think what is really important is that everyone agrees that this discussion is held in the beginning. Everybody accepts, and then also it should be fine for everybody. So it's probably not good if after 2 years a co-founder comes back and then say, since 2 years this doesn't feel right. So this would be a very bad situation.
But still it could happen that this changes after 2 years, for example. So for the beginning you feel that's okay, but then after 2 years...
Yeah, I think whenever it doesn't feel right, probably needs to be discussed.
And then you find a solution together.
Hopefully.
Luca Schuler also asked, what kind of contracts and terms do we need to outline our co-founding relationship? What would you do there from a legal perspective?
Sorry, what contracts and...
What contracts and terms do we need to outline from a legal perspective for managing the relationship with your co-founders?
We would usually have, of course, every co-founder would have a work agreement with the company. Mm-hmm. And then usually we would also have, and I would recommend this, especially if you want to get investors on board later on, I would recommend the shareholder agreement. These are probably the two things that I would do. It's very straightforward.
The basic stuff, basically. Vesting is also an important part in the shareholders agreement usually. What do you think about the co-founders' vesting schedule?
Yeah, I think vesting, I would in any case put this in. I think it's a good thing, and I would really also be I would want to rely on my co-founders. So the last thing that you want to happen is if co-founder leaves after 1 year and with all the shares, it's really a bad situation. I believe the vesting schedule can be a bit longer than is maybe usual, because most startups actually take a bit longer than the very optimistic founder thinks in the beginning. It's the nature of the founder. He should be very optimistic. But still, like a vesting schedule of more than 3 years, I think it's not wrong at all.
Okay, so you probably opt for 4 or even 5 years.
Yeah, depends if everyone agrees, and should be the same for everybody. But I don't think it's wrong, because many startups, they get sold after 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, and just the first 3 years are very, very important. And on the other hand, if even after 3 years, and if the vesting period is over, usually you still want to contribute, and the likelihood that you leave is actually not that big. But still, I'll probably do a bit more than 3 years, but not everybody might agree.
But I mean, that's also why we're here for, to get the different perspectives on this. Then you start working together as a co-founding team. One of the first things that you probably need to define is how you split up the roles. So the question from Cedric is, how should we split up responsibilities, and also showing the early stage to later stage evolution, as the roles might probably also change over time?
Well, to start with, it really depends on what people you have on board, but usually you need to have one guy who might become the CTO, or taking care of the technical side. Then you probably have one CEO, which is basically a sales guy to start with. That's his main role, apart from managing the company and maybe managing some other relations and partnerships, but he should sell. So it's very, very important. And then you might have one COO, which kind of ensures that everything is sound and solid. There may be variations, depends a bit on the skills. You could also have one guy who's, for example, very good. That's a bit how we have it now, like with sales and product definition, and then another role more like finance, investor management, and also sales. I think everybody should actually do sales. I think it's really important. All the co-founders should do, and should have the capability and willingness to also, promote yourself and do actually sales. So there may be variations, but this is probably the different areas that you really need to cover to start with. Over time, this may change. Sometimes you even take in larger management team. At Dacuda, we have taken in an experienced CEO at the time. This can happen. You might actually want to send your co-founders or go yourself to foreign markets to do the internationalization. It's usually a founder who should be there, just also to make sure that the whole ways of working, the values, just the DNA of the company is exported to your subsidiary. So this might be another very, very common role of a co-founder later on down the track.
And during the time that you work together as co-founders, there are usually ups and downs. So Shredded asked, are there any KPIs that you should focus on in order to maintain a good co-founder relationship, or also to determine how you actually work together as co-founders? I know KPI sounds maybe a bit weird in that context, but anyway, maybe you have an idea or take on this.
Well, the first and foremost, the most important thing is that you actually keep communicating and that you talk. One way of doing it is just to have something institutionalized, like we had at least for some time, and I think it was a good thing. We should have kept up more. Because
how did you do that specifically?
Because I think it's basically a good thing to have a slot reserved every month, 2 months, where you don't really have an agenda. You just talk about how you feel, how things are going, about the future ideas. So I think that's a very good forum where you can also, share whenever something doesn't feel right, where you can share it. Especially in phases where there's very high pressure, this might be actually a tool that you just implement this. Otherwise, KPIs, there's probably many we have never really done it, but it might actually be a good idea. Yeah.
You could also ask for a rating, for example, where you say every day or every week, you ask everybody, how are you feeling on a scale from 1 to 10?
Yeah, we're thinking about these measurements now for the whole team, but also for the management team or for the founders, this might make sense. Yeah,
right.
Why not?
If you do it on a regular basis, then you can also compare and then discuss that in the setup that you just mentioned.
Exactly.
The next question is also, what aspects is it okay to disagree with the co-founders? Basically, where should you be very aligned and agree with each other, and where is it okay to disagree and you can still work very well together, although you disagree?
I think it's important to really have discussions, and also very serious discussions, where you should have the right, and you should really disagree if you do disagree, especially when it comes about major changes on the strategy or the objective, vision, and so on. Of course, also in a daily life, I mean, there might be, discussions which are valuable, but then I think the most important thing is really once you have come to a conclusion and once a decision is there, you should just stop stop further discussing, because that then can really paralyze.
Right.
So have strong discussions, that's great, but once you have agreed, just stick to it.
What do you do if you don't agree to really avoid this overkill of discussing the same things over and over again? Is there any technique or hack that you can recommend to come to a fast conclusion and not turning in the same cycle?
No, I'm not saying that the fast conclusions are always the best ones. So sometimes actually decisions do take time. Sometimes it's entirely okay, just delay or say, let's discuss this once again next week. I'm just saying once we have decided, and then I would not really allow, that we rediscuss. Yeah, it's probably a bit of a leadership task then,
And are there any red flags that you see when co-founders discuss or also disagree with each other? Any red flags that you say, hey, this is an absolute no-go, you should really ask other questions if this is actually still working?
I think if you're aligned very well and share the same values, then this is not very, very likely to happen. But if it does, I would probably first ask myself, okay, why do I react so emotional about this? So what's the reason behind? Maybe this is actually not really about the exact issue or the exact thing which is being discussed, but more about something about my value set behind, which is kind of questioned. And then, I would rather reflect first and find this out and then discuss it.
And sometimes things just don't work out. So the breakup scenario can also happen with co-founders, just as you also have to fire employees sometimes. What would your recommendation be to go about firing or letting go of a co-founder because it's not working out? What would be the best process to handle and manage this?
Yeah, I mean, this can happen. I don't really have experience in this, I can say. But yeah, I mean, if this happens, there's usually two adult people with still a common and joint interest that the company will succeed. So yeah, I think there shouldn't probably be too much discussions about, I would hope that it would not be too emotional and just fact oriented, and the common goal would still be what's the best for the company and how can we mitigate the obvious, waves or the obvious challenges which come with the situation.
Because this can also be a death sentence for a company, right? If one or several co-founders leave. in an extreme scenario?
It can. But usually I tend to believe that nobody is really replaceable. So I think it should not. And if it is, then maybe also the risk management of the company or the management was maybe not that great.
You probably didn't do a good job beforehand then. Yes. You can also split your roles in a much luckier or better scenario. If your company gets acquired, you sell it, and then you also get on to different paths. You've done that with Dacuda, for example. Yeah. Alex is now working at Magic Leap. You started a new company. How do you decide about how to move forward there? Was that like your decision? Was that also sort of a decision made by the buyer? And how do you actually execute that?
Yeah, so in our specific case, and actually there were four co-founders, so Martin, Eric, and Alex are now with Magic Leap. I could have joined, I had the option, and it was not that of an easy decision, because it would have been also very interesting, would have been a very good offer. But at the end of the day, there were two factors. One, I believed that what I can do now is much more entrepreneurial, because we had a very, very good team. Mm-hmm. So former Dacuda employees all joined me, and we could do this together. So this is great. We had some opportunities because we had some existing customer relationships. There was a lot of know-how in the brain. So at the end of the day, it was also a very good opportunity. And of course, for Dacuda came in very handy because, otherwise I probably would have needed to look after this business from Magic Leap side, or someone else would have needed to worry about it. So I think the scenario, it really served everyone very well. And everyone was very happy at the end.
And as it sounds, you also followed your gut feeling because you wanted to do something more entrepreneurial.
Yeah, usually with the very, very difficult decisions, I tend to rationalize first a lot, but then at the end, I probably would not choose the scenario which kind of hit the largest, whatever number of points or something, but I would follow the heart, and it's probably the best, the better way.
Is there anything else that you would like to the topic of finding your co-founders that we have not talked about yet?
No, just at the end of the day, it should be fun also to work with your team, and you should, it's still, you spend a lot of time working in any case. As a founder of a company, probably spend even a bit more time working. So it really should be fun. It shouldn't feel like, you're kind of wasting your time, or it's boring, or that you spend time with people you really can't, you don't want to work together with. So it should really be fun. So choose them well. And it's probably the most important decision when setting up a startup.
Almost like marriage.
Almost like marriage.
So enjoy the process and the ride, basically, and don't be too much focused on the end goal, because the process should be fun, I think.
Exactly.
Beautiful words to close. Thank you so much, Michael, for taking the time. It's been a pleasure talking to you today and
thank you.
Answering all the user questions. And I wish you all the best for your future and for PXL Vision's future.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the content, we would be thrilled to receive your rating on Apple Podcasts. Next week, we will already be back with a new episode of the Swisspreneur Show. We will meet with Estefania Tapias. She is the co-founder of WeSpace, a women-centered community based in Zurich, Switzerland. We talk about how she started a company in Switzerland as a foreigner, how she grew up in Colombia and how her entrepreneurial parents influenced her career, and also how she met her co-founder Laura on a blind date. This and much more will be packed in an all-new Swisspreneur Show episode for next week, so make sure to tune in again.